you mentioned restoring rights, because some people watching our show may have a felony conviction.
Yes, and many people, in years past, let me say this, in years past, I was talking to the voter registrar, our voter registrar here in Denton, Frank Phillips. Many people in the past, if they had a prior felony conviction, they thought, and you did, had to petition the federal court, or if it was a district court or a federal court, to have your rights restored so you could vote again. This is not true. If you can go in and to the Elections Administration and show that you are no longer on parole, or that you have served all time, and that you're under no further legal restrictions by the state of Texas, such as registering under parole or anything like that. Once you have completed all the requirements of a felony sentence, then they will register you to vote again. Your rights are restored.
Before going any further, let's deal with the basics. So who can vote in Texas? In fact, we've got a graphic on that.
Yes, and of course you have to be 18 years of age.
Okay.
You cannot. You need to have a place of residence that they can mail to you.
Right.
And you can't have any prior felony convictions. And of course, be adjudicated insane by a probate court, or have mental problems, mental handicaps, I guess would be.
And you have to be a U.S. citizen.
Oh, of course, yes, you have to be a U.S.
and
citizen.
18. And
you have to have resided in Texas here.
For how long?
Well, residency requirements in the state of Texas are 6 months usually. Once you move here and register, then you're there. And
you mentioned the felony conviction. However, you just mentioned to us how you can actually get those rights restored, though.
That's true, and that's something I think is very important, because some people, I've had many people come into my office and they did some stupid things when they were really, really young, and now they're 20 years later and they're interested in the community and they just say, yes, but I can't vote. And you can't imagine the joy, literally the joy that they feel when you say, no, you can go vote. You know, well, are you off parole now? Have you finished everything?
Exactly.
Sure. Well, oh yeah, I did that 10, 15 years ago. Well, then go register. And they're just amazed. In fact, I had one gentleman come back into me with that voter card. He was so proud of it. He came back in to show me that he was actually registered to vote. And interestingly enough, I've worked with him on other things, and he not only has his voter registration card, but he's voted in every election, from a bond election to school board to presidential to primaries, every election that he had in the last 8 years.
That's fantastic.
It is.
Let's back up and talk about that voter registration application. So when you are applying, when you're completing your application, essentially you just have to have your name, your address, your physical address where you get your mail. And then, of course, you have to have your date of birth. However, if you do not have a driver's license or a personal ID number or a social security number, can you still register to vote? Yes, you can. However, you do need to go into the voter registration if you do that, because they will want other proof, which can be anything, a passport, a military ID, utility bill, a utility bill, that kind of thing, to show that you are in fact eligible to vote in this state. Now, the kicker on this is, and this is something that many people forget, the lower part of the voter registration card has some squares on it. And we're looking at that right now. And the biggest problem that I have seen with not only deputy voter registrars, but also heard from elections administrations, and as a former party chairman in registering people to vote, is filling out those little squares correctly. You would be amazed the number of people who put two numbers in one square. Exactly. Or the letters don't match up, or under the date of birth, they don't put, they'll put the month and the day, but then they only put the last two numbers of the year. Instead of putting 2001, they'll put just 01, things like that. That's why when you fill out this registration card, if you want to do it yourself, I recommend people have a deputy voter registrar help them, because they are trained. But if you're filling it out yourself or with a voter registrar, be very, very careful about how you're filling in and what blanks you're filling in. Meaning your driver's license number, or the last 4 digits of your social security number, or your date of birth. Correct. For example, that's the key information, I believe. Right. And then when you sign the card, read it carefully, because it says some things there that are legally binding. And for example, Neil. Well, if you look at the card, I'm trying to remember
The penalties, that this is like swearing an oath. It's just like you were sitting in a court of law. And if anything on here is incorrect, you can be charged with perjury. Now, I will tell you, this was the justification for the voter ID law, that there was some kind of massive fraud going out there. And we'll get to that.
Which is not in force right now.
That's correct. And of course, it was a solution looking for a problem. But there is some legally binding language, and you're representing that you are a resident of the county,
exactly,
that you're a U.S. citizen, that you have not been finally convicted of a felony,
exactly,
or that you've been pardoned, and that there's no final judgment in a probate court adjudicating you as mentally incompetent, the other things we were talking about. But people need to read that and be very careful.
Okay.
And then, of course, sign within the box. Don't scrawl somewhere else, and then date it carefully. Those are the major problems that people have in registering to vote. Ironically, and I'm not trying to get ahead of you here, but I think it's ironic, the United States of America has the easiest voter requirements and the easiest registration of anywhere in the world, and we have the lowest voter turnouts. In countries where voting is just almost a marathon task, they have extremely high turnouts. In our country, for some reason, the easier we make it, the more accessible we make it, fewer people vote. And, well,
that's a separate issue.
I'll get off my soapbox on that in a little while.
I understand. We appreciate that. Once you apply, a voter registration certificate should be mailed to you within 30 days. So if you show up to vote without your certificate, what can you do?
All you have to produce, and this covers 2 points really. All you have to produce is ID. If you're registered at that time, even if they haven't gotten your card back to you, if you can show a photo ID, a driver's license, military ID, a utility bill, anything to identify that you are who you say you are, even student IDs, then you're going to be allowed to vote.
Okay, and let's emphasize for those who perhaps just tuned into the show, the Texas voter ID law is not applicable at this time.
That's an important point, and we need to say that we are still under the old law, which means if you don't have a card, all you have to do is show some form of ID, a utility bill, that you're who you say you are,
exactly,
and that you are a resident of the county. And if you can show that, a driver's license, a military ID, a concealed carry ID, any kind of ID that will identify who you are and that you're here, you're going to be allowed to vote. And that's an important point for people to remember.
Having worked various elections over the years, and even having served as an election judge, I know that typically what happens sometimes is people move within the county. So there are 2 questions. So what happens if you move within the county? What happens to your voter registration in terms of your polling place?
Well, it changes. And here's the problem that people have. Some people just say, oh, I don't care, I'll just go back over and vote in my old polling place. That's a little disingenuous. It's not really being truthful about where you are and who you are. The major thing to do, and it's really quite simple to do, is to go to the Elections Administration
in Denton,
and or register again.
Let's look at the card. Well, and if you're moving within the county, though, can you just?
Yes, there's a square where you check there.
Complete a change.
Mail the card in, and change your address, and you're going to get a voter ID card back. So even if you can't get to Denton, there's a very simple way to do it. Like I said, filling it out again, but just checking the box instead of new application, just saying change of address, and they'll send you a voter ID card right back to that address. It's very simple.
Now.